Sally Bowman was born on September 11, 1987 in London, the capital of England. Her parents were Linda and Paul Bowman, and she had a close-knit, friendly family. Despite her young age, Sally was known for her maturity and desire for independence, which led her to move out of her family home and into a rented apartment where she lived alone. Modeling and fashion were her passions, and she was accepted into the prestigious British Academy of Performing Arts, an institution that boasts celebrities like Tom Holland and Adele among its alumni. Gaining admission to such a distinguished school was a remarkable achievement for her. Sally's career took a leap forward when she became the face of Swatch watches and joined a modeling agency in the city. On September 24, 2005, she spent the day relaxing at her mother's house before her sister Nicole called to invite her out for the evening. The sisters made plans and later met up with friends, heading out to a venue in the city center. Security cameras at the venue captured Sally enjoying herself and dancing at the bar. At the end of the night, she left with her sister, Nicole. Shortly after they parted ways, Sally began texting her recent ex-boyfriend, Lewis, expressing a desire to meet up with him. After sending her sister home in a taxi, Sally waited for Lewis at their agreed meeting spot, and he soon picked her up in his car. Their breakup had only happened a few weeks earlier, and emotions were still raw. Soon they began arguing in the car, and the disagreement lasted until around 4 in the morning. Afterwards, Sally got out of the car and Lewis drove off. A witness later reported being woken by a scream, then looked out the window but saw nothing. After about 5 minutes of quiet observation, they saw a man walking down the street but heard no more noises and went back to bed. Around 6:30 a.m., a neighbor stepped outside and saw what looked like a mannequin leg behind a wooden board. Upon closer inspection, they discovered the partially clothed body of Sally Bowman and immediately called the police. The police quickly began their investigation, delivering the devastating news to Linda Bowman that her daughter had been fatally stabbed.
Obviously, went downstairs, opened the door, and the gentleman in the suit said, "Are you Mrs. Bowman?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have a daughter called Sally Ann?" And the first thing I said was, "What have they done now?" Because I knew the sisters had been out together. And he said, "Can we come in?" So I said, "Yep." And as I walked round into the lounge, I hadn't even sat down, and the next thing I knew, he just said, "She's been killed, stabbed to death."
They gathered details of the night from Linda and Nicole, piecing together a timeline. It appeared Sally had gotten out of Lewis's car, walked towards her home, and was caught off guard by a violent attack. She was stabbed at least 7 times, with 3 wounds severe enough to be fatal. An autopsy also revealed that she had been sexually assaulted. Lewis Sproston, who had argued with Sally on the night she was killed, was quickly identified as a potential suspect. He was one of the last people seen with her, making him a primary focus for the police. He was arrested that evening along with his brother and a friend. Lewis claimed he knew nothing about Sally's murder until questioned by the police and offered his cooperation. However, a DNA sample taken from him did not match the semen found on Sally's body, leading to his elimination as a suspect. The investigation took a turn when the forensic service reported that the DNA from the crime scene matched that from an unsolved sexual assault case that had occurred 4 years earlier, just 2 kilometers from where Sally was murdered. In the previously unresolved case, a woman was attacked and raped by a man who approached her while she was using a phone booth. Although the police obtained the attacker's DNA from this incident, no further clues emerged, and the case quickly went cold. As Sally's investigation unfolded, the police received troubling information about an incident that had taken place just an hour before her murder. Near Sanderstead Road, a man apologized to a woman before assaulting her while she was on her cell phone. Fortunately, a passing taxi intervened, helping the victim to the hospital and potentially preventing a more tragic outcome. The victim provided a detailed description of her attacker, which led the police to compile a report on the suspect they were pursuing. Detectives suspected that this man was also responsible for Sally's murder. Described as being in his 30s, around 180 meters tall, with short black hair, a composite sketch of him circulated widely, generating numerous calls from the public, but not significantly advancing the investigation. The only certainty was that the killer was a local, prompting the police to conduct a DNA sweep of the area. However, they faced a significant challenge. With over 6,000 addresses to check, they needed to identify the residents at each one. On the night of Sally's murder, an estimated 4,000 people were in the vicinity, making it highly unlikely that the killer would willingly provide his DNA. The investigation slowed down, and despite pursuing all leads, the detectives knew the perpetrator could strike again at any moment. In 2006, the detectives decided to adjust their strategy. They temporarily set aside Sally's case to refocus on the phone booth attack. They believed that the assailant in that case was the same person who had killed Sally, prompting them to reissue the attacker's sketch. A press conference was held to generate public attention, but a breakthrough came from an unexpected incident. During a World Cup match at a bar 30 kilometers away in Croydon, an argument broke out and spilled into the street, captured by nearby cameras. A local police officer intervened, diffusing the situation and detaining a man named Mark Dixie, aged 35. Dixie appeared nervous upon being questioned, leading to the collection of DNA samples. 12 days later, detectives received the awaited news. The DNA found on Sally's body matched Mark Dixie's DNA. Determined to prevent another tragedy, the police set out to locate Mark. Aware of the police pursuit, Mark had fled to Amsterdam after the murder. Following a 3-month stay and a landlord dispute, he returned to the UK and took up a job as a chef in a bar. The police located Mark at his workplace and arrested him there. The arresting officer distinctly remembered placing his hand on Mark's chest to prevent his escape, feeling his heartbeat through the shirt. The next day, Mark Dixie was charged with Sally Bowman's murder, remaining silent as the charges were read out against him. Mark Dixie was born in 1970. His parents separated when he was a child, and at 18 months old his mother remarried, causing him to adopt his stepfather's surname and become Mark MacDonald. However, he didn't stick with this name, choosing various aliases like Mark Philip Dixie, Mark James Down, Stephen MacDonald, and Shane Turner. In 1986, at 16, he committed his first known crime by robbing a woman at knife point in Stockwell, which resulted in a 6-week prison sentence. The following year, he was convicted of theft and received a 2-year prison term. His criminal activities persisted, leading to a conviction for indecent exposure in 1989, with an 80-hour community service sentence. Mark's criminal activities extended beyond England. In 1993, he moved to Australia, where his troubles quickly caught up with him. In Perth, a student living alone heard noises in her kitchen and was confronted by a masked and armed Mark Dixie. Tragically, she was stabbed 7 times by Mark, losing consciousness and falling victim to sexual assault. On New Year's Day, 1999, he attempted to attack a young woman jogging along the road, dragging her into the bushes to solicit sex. Just 3 days later, he was fined $750 and deported from Australia. The main focus for detectives was unraveling how Sally's murder unfolded. On the night of Sally's death, Mark attended a birthday party at a friend's house, just 100 meters from Sally's home. His friends noted that he spent the evening withdrawn, brooding, and heavily intoxicated. After his friends had gone to bed, Mark's behavior took a darker turn. Initially trying to assault a woman on Sanderstead Road, he grew frustrated when she managed to escape, thwarting his deviant intentions. He then encountered Sally Bowman, who unfortunately happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Following the murder, he casually returned to his residence, shared with 2 female friends, and fell asleep on the couch as if nothing had happened. Working with Australian authorities, investigative detectives found that Mark's DNA matched that from the student assault. In February 2008, Mark Dixie appeared in court at the Old Bailey in London, surprising everyone with his demeanor during the trial. His defense was even more surprising. He admitted to being a rapist, but claimed he stumbled upon Sally already deceased and took the opportunity to assault her. Denying responsibility for her death, he alleged that the true killer was still at large. However, his story failed to persuade the jury, who quickly returned a guilty verdict for murder. Mark Dixie was sentenced to a minimum of 34 years in prison, one of the longest sentences in England, with parole eligibility extended to when he turned 70. Before we dive into our next story, if you could take a moment to hit that like button, it would mean the world to us. A single click for you is a huge boost of encouragement for us. Haley Anderson, born on May 9, 1995 in Westbury, New York, was known for her unwavering support for friends, her cheerful demeanor, and her attentive listening skills. She pursued her dream of becoming a nurse at Binghamton University, aiming to make a difference in people's lives during their most vulnerable moments. She was determined, and her passion led her to be accepted into the nursing program. On the evening of March 7, 2018, Haley and her roommates gathered to play board games late into the night. However, the next morning, her roommate Josie texted Haley and received no response, assuming she was still asleep. Throughout Thursday, all attempts to reach Haley went unanswered, causing her friends to worry. Despite promising Josie she would attend a poetry night that evening, Haley remained unreachable. Taking action on March 9, 2018, another roommate, Michelle, used the Find My Friends app to track Haley's phone to a friend's apartment on the west side of Binghamton. Orlando Tercero, originally from Nicaragua, aimed to follow in his father's footsteps as a doctor. He and Haley became close friends during her second year in the nursing program, frequently spending time together at off-campus parties and at Haley's apartment with her roommate Josie. Haley also had a boyfriend named Kevin, whom she met at university, but she had reservations about the seriousness of their relationship. At a party, she introduced Kevin to her friend Orlando, leading to an unexpected turn of events. One morning, after Kevin stayed over at Haley's apartment, he discovered slashed tires on her car, fueling Haley's suspicion of having an enemy. Haley confronted Orlando, believing he was involved, but he denied any wrongdoing. Despite Orlando's denial, Haley's mother, Karen, suspected him of having romantic feelings for her daughter. Following this incident, Haley distanced herself from Orlando, despite the encouragement of her friends and family to do the same. Eventually, she allowed him back into her life. On March 9th, the day Haley disappeared, marked 6 months since the tire slashing incident, with no reported problems during that time. Josie tracked Haley's location to a house and immediately called the police, informing them about finding Haley's phone and urging them to come quickly. While waiting for the police, they knocked on the door but were met with complete silence. They then noticed an open window. Michelle climbed in first, followed by Josie, and they discovered Haley's lifeless body in Orlando's bedroom. The police arrived shortly after and found disturbing evidence. Metal hooks had been screwed into the entryway with a tie threaded through them. A chair was positioned at the entrance, with gauze and paper towels scattered on the kitchen counter. There was also a suicide note written in Spanish. The author of the note expressed deep sorrow, apologized for his actions, and mentioned he would soon join his father, who had passed away 5 years earlier, confirming Orlando as the note's author. Based on the evidence, investigators concluded that Orlando had attempted to take his own life, but had failed, injuring himself in the process. Examinations of Haley's body revealed bruising around her neck and facial hemorrhages, indicating she had been strangled. Detectives, now treating the case as a murder investigation, identified Orlando Tercero as the person of interest and began searching for him, but he was nowhere to be found. That afternoon, police officers visited Karen's home to deliver the tragic news of Haley's death. Karen, Haley's mother, was unaware of her daughter's disappearance since they didn't communicate daily, only speaking on Sundays. As detectives delved into the investigation, they interviewed friends of both Haley and Orlando, with many acquaintances cooperating with the police. The findings pointed to Orlando's obsession with Haley, displaying jealousy and attempting to control her. He tried to isolate her from friends, acted possessively, and became angry when she spent time with others. With his tragic tales, Orlando managed to deceive Haley, manipulating her kind nature and gaining control over her. While authorities searched for Orlando, they first questioned his sister. On the day of the murder, Orlando had sent her messages admitting he had done something terrible that would bring shame to the family. He also told his sister that he had left his car at John F. Kennedy Airport, which was crucial information for the detectives. Authorities began investigating Tercero's flight records and confirmed that he had flown back to his home in Nicaragua. They also reviewed the security camera footage at Orlando's apartment complex, where they discovered crucial evidence. The footage showed Haley entering the building early on the morning of March 8th, her final appearance tragically. 7 hours later, Orlando was seen leaving the apartment alone, raising suspicions about his whereabouts. Following a bill found at the scene, investigators traced Orlando to a pharmacy where he purchased 2 different brands of sleeping pills. 16 hours before Haley's body was discovered, Orlando left his residence for the airport, his head wrapped in a bandage as seen on camera, confirming his failed suicide attempt. Upon his arrival at the Nicaraguan airport, Orlando was greeted by his mother, Martha Moreno, who took him to her hometown and kept him hidden for a few days. They eventually left the house to seek medical attention for his injuries, but by then, the Nicaraguan police were already on his trail. Orlando was apprehended near the hospital on March 13, 2018, and his capture was announced publicly the following day. Although U.S. authorities requested Orlando's extradition, Nicaragua declined due to an agreement between the two countries that protects their citizens. Orlando's trial in Nicaragua began on October 1, 2019, with his family and friends present. The Binghamton detectives presented compelling evidence, including CCTV footage and a handwritten note found at the crime scene, to the judge. Orlando's defense attorney argued that his client was under the influence of alcohol and not in the right state of mind during the crime. The defense called Orlando's psychiatrist as a witness in an attempt to mitigate his punishment. On November 1, 2019, Orlando Tercero was found guilty of Haley's murder and sentenced to the maximum penalty in Nicaragua, 30 years in prison. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented, Orlando's friends staunchly maintained his innocence, believing he could not have committed such a horrific act. Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands. His father, Paulus, was a lawyer, and his mother, Anita, was an art teacher. When Joran was 3, his family moved to Aruba, where he grew up with his 2 younger brothers. He stood out as an honor student at the International School of Aruba and excelled in sports like soccer and tennis. However, Anita, Joran's mother, noticed some concerning behaviors in him. He had a tendency to lie and was drawn to the nightlife with his friends. This behavior worried his family as they feared he might get into trouble at a young age. Joran wasn't just drinking, he was also frequently seen at casinos. One evening in May, Joran met a young woman named Natalie Holloway from Memphis, Tennessee, during a night out in Aruba. Born in October 1986, Natalie was the eldest child of Dave and Beth Holloway. After her parents' divorce in 1993, she and her brother were raised by their mother, who later remarried. Her stepfather, George Twitty, was a prominent businessman, and the family relocated to Alabama. In May 2005, Natalie graduated from high school with honors and planned to pursue a career in medicine in college. She went on a graduation trip to Aruba on May 25th with 124 classmates. Throughout the week, they celebrated their graduation and explored the island's nightlife. On May 29th, Joran saw Natalie and her friends in Nord and approached them to join the festivities. Later that night, Joran and Natalie met at a downtown bar where they enjoyed drinks and dancing. This turned out to be one of Natalie's final sightings before she left the bar with Joran and two others, Deepak Kalpo, 21, and his 18-year-old brother, Sadish Kalpo. Natalie was supposed to catch a flight the next day, but when her friends gathered at the airport, she was nowhere to be found. Her belongings, including her passport and luggage, were discovered in her room at the Holiday Inn. Concerned, her friends reported her disappearance to the authorities. Aruban officials promptly initiated a search, scouring the waters around the island, but unfortunately no signs of Natalie were found. After learning that their daughter had missed her flight, Natalie's parents flew to Aruba on a private jet to launch their independent investigation. The main investigator revealed that Natalie and her group of students had been hosting wild parties in Aruba, consuming excessive amounts of alcohol, and frequently changing rooms. The investigation brought to light that Natalie drank alcohol daily and used drugs. Furthermore, it was noted that Natalie missed breakfast on 2 consecutive mornings. These specific details were shared with her family, shedding light on Natalie's lifestyle and risky behaviors in her final days. The hotel manager at their lodging provided the authorities with Joran van der Sloot's name and address. 2 Aruban officers then proceeded to Joran's residence. Joran confessed to meeting Natalie that night, accompanying the Kalpo brothers to the California lighthouse and dropping her off at her hotel around 2 a.m. He recalled observing Natalie stumble as she exited the car and offering to escort her to her room, which she declined. As they drove off, they noticed a man in a black shirt approaching Natalie, assuming he was a friend. Following this account, Joran and the Kalpo brothers were brought in for questioning by the police. Unexpectedly, later that evening, arrests were made. Initially, it was not Joran or the Kalpo brothers who were apprehended, but former security guards from a nearby hotel. These guards were known to frequent hotels attempting to meet women and had previous encounters with law enforcement. They were detained for 8 days but were later released due to insufficient evidence. On June 9th, the authorities arrested Joran and the Kalpo brothers on charges of kidnapping and murdering Natalie Holloway. However, due to the lack of evidence of an abduction or a body, they were released a month later on account of insufficient evidence. In the 3 months that followed the incident, a total of 7 individuals were arrested and subsequently released, including Joran's father. According to the lead investigator, these premature arrests were carried out under pressure from the Holloway family, suggesting interference in the investigation by the family. During press interviews, Joran shared his version of events. The most notable interview took place in March, during which Joran claimed that Natalie had expressed a desire to have sex with him, but he declined as he did not have a condom. He also mentioned that Natalie had proposed staying on the beach that night, a suggestion refused by the group, who then dropped her off at the hotel before heading home. 2.5 years after Natalie's disappearance, detectives reopened the case, citing new evidence. Joran van der Sloot, Deepak Kalpo, and Sadish Kalpo were arrested on suspicion of causing serious bodily harm and manslaughter resulting in Natalie Holloway's death. On November 30th, a judge ordered the release of the Kalpo brothers. 2 weeks later, Joran was also released. Then on March 29, 2010, a bizarre twist occurred when Joran contacted Natalie's family lawyers, claiming he knew the location of Natalie Holloway's body and the circumstances surrounding her death. However, he demanded $250,000 in exchange for this information. The lawyer reported this unusual offer to the FBI, and together they devised a plan. Initially, $10,000 in cash was handed over, followed by a $15,000 wire transfer to Joran's bank account. However, the authorities found the information provided to be false as the location he specified had not been constructed at the time of Natalie's disappearance. By 2012, Natalie was legally declared dead. Her disappearance remained unresolved, and if deceased, her body was never found. 5 years after Natalie vanished, another girl would go missing, this time in Peru. Stephanie Flores, a 21-year-old business student at Lima University and the daughter of businessman Ricardo Flores, had a bright future ahead of her. On May 14, 2010, Joran van der Sloot decided to participate in a Latin American poker tournament and entered Peru via Colombia. Ironically, the tournament date coincided with the 5th anniversary of Natalie's disappearance. On May 30th, he met Stephanie at the Atlantic City Casino. According to Joran's mother, Anita, her son was supposed to be receiving mental health treatment in the Netherlands, but instead went to Peru to gamble. He met Stephanie while playing cards and invited her to his hotel room. They entered room 309, and these moments were captured by security cameras. In early June, Flores' family noticed she was missing and reported it to the police. The hotel staff was questioned and mentioned seeing Joran and Stephanie together. Upon reviewing the security footage from the night of the incident, they observed the two entering the room, but only Joran was seen leaving. Stephanie's bruised body was found in room 309. Stephanie's father mentioned that jewelry, credit cards, and over $10,000 were missing from her car. A tennis racket discovered in the room was identified as the murder weapon. Authorities quickly located Joran in Chile, and he was arrested. Initially, he professed his innocence, but 4 days later, he admitted to killing the young woman. In his statement to the Peruvian police, he recounted playing poker with Stephanie in his room. When she saw something about the Natalie case on his computer, it angered him. He hit her face with his elbow, grabbed her throat, smashed her head against the wall, and then strangled her. Joran later retracted his confession, stating he spoke out of fear and confusion, alleging that Peruvian authorities had deceived him by promising leniency and extradition to the Netherlands if he told them what they wanted to hear. Eventually, he reverted to his initial confession, acknowledging the murder of Stephanie exactly as he first described. Joran's mother, Anita, insisted that her son had no involvement in Natalie's disappearance, maintaining he hadn't seen her after dropping her off at the beach. In January 2012, Joran van der Sloot was convicted of Stephanie Flores' murder and received a 28-year prison sentence. After serving 11 years in prison, he was extradited from Peru to the United States on June 8, 2023. The following day, June 9th, he faced trial in a federal court for extortion and wire fraud against Natalie Holloway's mother, Beth Holloway. October 18, 2023, was a significant date for the Holloway family. In a plea agreement, Joran confessed to killing Natalie. That evening, he made sexual advances towards her and, upon rejection, kicked and struck her with a cinder block before disposing of her body in the ocean. Before we conclude this video, please be aware that the video on the left may be disturbing. It is recommended for adult viewing only. On the right, you'll find a playlist of videos that have been highly appreciated by our viewers.